What do you do when the one person you genuinely connect with at work crosses a line that changes everything? That moment when someone says something they can never unsay, and suddenly every interaction you've ever had with them gets replayed in your head in an entirely different light. That's exactly where I found myself 3 months ago. And I have been sitting on this story, trying to figure out how to even talk about it. But today we're going there because honestly, I think a lot of you have either been in this situation or you know someone who has, and nobody really talks about what it actually feels like from the inside. So let me take you back to how this whole thing started, because context matters here. I need you to understand who this person was to me before any of this happened, because that's what makes the whole thing so complicated. I started at my current job about 2 years ago. The workplace was new. I didn't know anybody, and the learning curve was steep. There's always that adjustment period where you're figuring out not just the job itself, but the social dynamics, who to trust, who to eat lunch with, all of that. And pretty early on, this coworker, let's call him M, became one of the people who made that transition easier. He was friendly, genuinely helpful, the kind of person who would spend an extra 20 minutes explaining something instead of just pointing you to a document. I noticed he wore a wedding ring. I knew he was married. That information registered, filed itself away, and I moved on because why wouldn't I? He was just a coworker being kind. Over the following months, we became what I would describe as genuine work friends. We talked about projects, vented about deadlines, shared recommendations for shows and books, had those long conversations that stretch past lunch break and then you both have to rush back to your desks. It was easy and comfortable and completely, from my perspective, platonic. I was not reading into anything because there was nothing to read, or so I thought. Here's the thing about mixed signals that nobody warns you about. You don't always recognize them as mixed signals when they're happening. You interpret them through the lens of what you believe the relationship to be. A longer text than usual is just someone being talkative. An extra compliment is just someone being encouraging. Wanting to talk to you more than others is just compatibility. None of it feels alarming in isolation. It's only later, much later, that you start connecting the dots and feeling completely disoriented. About 3 months ago, we were both working late to finish a project. The office was mostly empty, that strange quiet that office buildings get after hours when all the ambient noise disappears. We finished. We sat there for a minute just talking the way you do when you've just accomplished something stressful together. And then he said something that I cannot get out of my head. He told me that being around me is the best part of his day, that he thinks about me more than he should, that he doesn't know what to do about how he feels. I remembered the exact feeling of that moment. It's like when you're reading a book and you realize you've misunderstood a major plot point and you have to mentally reread the last 100 pages with new information. Except the book is your actual life and the pages are real interactions with a real person who has a real wife. I didn't know what to say. I think I said something like I didn't know he felt that way and that I needed to think, which was true. I did need to think. I needed approximately 1,000 years to think. He nodded, looked embarrassed but not regretful, and we both went home. Now here's where I want to be real with you, because I think the honest version of this story is more useful than the clean version. My immediate reaction was not anger. I wish I could tell you I was immediately clear-headed and firm and had the perfect response locked and loaded. That's not what happened. My immediate reaction was confusion and, if I'm being completely truthful, a strange kind of sadness. Not because I had hidden feelings for him. I didn't. But because something that felt safe and uncomplicated had just become the opposite of those things. And grief is sometimes about losing a version of a relationship, not a person. I also felt, and I'm not proud of this initial reaction, a little bit flattered. And then I felt guilty for feeling flattered. And then I felt frustrated with myself for the guilt. If you have ever experienced something like this, you know that the emotional processing is not linear and it is not simple, and anyone who tells you what you should have felt in that moment has probably never been in it. But here's the thing I came back to after I gave myself permission to feel all of that. This was not actually about me. His feelings, whatever they were his responsibility. His marriage was his responsibility. The fact that he decided to say those words out loud was a choice he made. And whether it was an impulsive one or a deliberate one, it had consequences for my work environment that I did not ask for and did not deserve. The next day I went in early so I could talk to him before anyone else arrived. I had thought about what I wanted to say, and I said it. I told him that I valued our friendship and that his words had caught me completely off guard. I told him that I didn't share those feelings in a romantic sense and that I needed us to be clear about what our relationship was and what it wasn't. I also said something that I think is important, and I'll say it to you too. I told him that whatever was happening in his life or his marriage was something he needed to address, but that I couldn't be part of that equation. Not because I was judging him, but because it wasn't fair to either of us. He was quiet for a moment, and then he apologized. A real apology, not a defensive one. He said he shouldn't have put that on me and that he respected what I said. And then we went to work. Now, you might be thinking, okay, that's it? Problem solved? Story over? But here's the part that nobody really prepares you for. The after. Because after a conversation like that, especially in a workplace setting, you still have to see each other. You still have to collaborate on projects. You still have to sit in the same meetings and answer emails and navigate a space that has been permanently altered. The discomfort doesn't vanish just because the words have been said. It settles into the environment, and you carry it with you every single day. For the first few weeks, it was awkward. There's no other word for it. The natural ease that had existed between us was replaced by a kind of careful politeness. We were professional, we were functional, but the warmth was gone, and the absence of it was its own kind of strange. I won't pretend that didn't sting a little, even though I knew it was necessary. What helped me more than anything during that period was getting perspective from people outside the situation. I talked to a friend who is genuinely wise about relationships and human behavior, and she said something that I keep coming back to. She said that sometimes people confuse a meaningful connection with a romantic one, especially when something is missing in their own lives. That doesn't make what he did okay, but it helped me understand it as a human failure rather than a predatory act, which shifted how I was able to move through it. I also want to address something directly, because I know some of you are going to think it. No, I did not feel obligated to tell his wife. That was a decision I made consciously and not without thinking it through. He had expressed feelings to me. He had not acted on them in any physical or ongoing way. What he does with those feelings, what he does about his marriage, those are not my choices to make. I'm not going to perform a kind of moral vigilance that I don't actually think is mine to perform. I know people will disagree with that, and I respect that, but that was my call. Today, honestly, things are better. We've settled into a new version of our working relationship that is more boundaried and probably more appropriate than what existed before. I'm not angry at him. I'm not carrying this as a wound, but I am different because of it. More aware of how I engage with people at work. More attentive to the dynamics I allow to develop. If you're in a similar situation right now, what I want you to hold on to is this. You don't have to have the perfect response in the perfect moment. You don't have to feel exactly one way about it. And you are not responsible for managing someone else's emotional life at the expense of your own peace. Take your time, be honest, hold your boundary, and then let yourself move forward. That's all you can do. And most of the time, it turns out to be enough.